Hello and thank you for watching to North Central Texas Council of Governments September Online Input Opportunity. My name is Chris Klaus and I'm a Senior Program Manager here in the Transportation Department. Today we'll be presenting 5 different topics. Our Director of Transportation, Michael Morris, will provide information on an innovative public-private partnership for the State Highway 183 Segment 2 East project. Senior Program Manager Dan Lamers will present a high occupancy vehicle pilot project along the US 75 corridor. Bethany Ross will give details for activities during this year's National Drive Electric Week. Jason Brown will provide the latest efforts for enforcing local motor vehicle idling restrictions. And finally, Jenny Narvaez and Lauren Johnson will showcase work related to a regional comprehensive emissions reduction program. Information related to Map Your Experience, our online input mapping tool, the Regional Smoking Vehicle Program, and vehicle incentives are also available online. Comments on the aforementioned topics can be submitted on our website, which is www.nctcog.org/input. They can be emailed to transinfo@nctcog.org, can be mailed to P.O. Box 5888, Arlington, Texas 76005, from Monday, September 13th through Tuesday, October 12th. To request printed copies of the information, you can call 817-608-2365 or email Carly Baylor at cbaylor@nctcog.org.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Michael Morris. I'm the Transportation Director here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. Thank you for joining us during this public meeting. The project I want to talk to you about is our Public-Private Partnership Segment 2E project. I'd like to give you some context and understand why I think this project is so important and the safety benefits that this project has for us. And the timing, moving ahead at this particular point in time, as our DFW International Airport recovers in the post-COVID-19 world, as well as our managed lane system, it'd be nice to get these projects underway previous to our recovery post-COVID-19. So let me walk you through this partnership we have with our Centra partners in the State Highway 183 corridor. So just as background, under their current contract with TxDOT, our public and private sector relationship, our private sector partner has to make improvements in the segment North Terran Express segment 1 and 2W. It's important for you to understand that those improvements are being made to the freeway to widen the freeway, because the volumes on the freeway are so high. It is triggering that under their contract. And they have to make improvements to the managed lanes because the volumes are so high in that section. They have to, according to their contract, widen the managed lane. And the revenues are so high in that corridor, those revenues have to be shared with us in the public sector. All of that is due to the existing contract and the public-private partnership that we have with Centra in that corridor. If in fact those improvements occur, you're going to have what we call lane imbalance, where in the blue segment, segment 2E, the lanes are not going to meet up, and it's going to create a safety problem as well as a significant congestion problem. This is a deferred, segment 2E is a deferred segment on the original construction. Our partners wish to come forward and pay for that section now. I'll share with you the dollar amount in a moment. But 100% of the money for the blue section, as well as 100% of the money for the red section, is coming from them, not from us in the public sector. And it is to lane balance those express lanes with the express lanes that are being built in the already segment 1 and 2 W sections, and the improvements that they have to make to those managed lane sections. It's been a long criticism of the temporary way in which the managed lane exists south of the airport. So this would move us in the direction of solving that particular problem, as well as bring us additional interchange capacity to State Highway 360. Because if they go ahead and do their Section 2E, and this is the eastern termination of their project, they can't go any further east in their agreement. They also want to send money to TxDOT, so TxDOT can hire a contractor to, again, lane balance the express lane to the already constructed section in Irving. So we would have a system of improvements across this corridor, which was always the intention. When we went to the public and said, we're going to upgrade this corridor, and went through eminent domain, it always was this plan to build this particular system, and we especially I feel we owe the original folks whose right-of-way was purchased for this corridor to see the corridor improve to its original vision. And that's what we're trying to do with this outreach. So 1 and 2W are being done under their existing contract. 2E is proposed to be done under their deferred section of their existing contract. Their contract ends at 161, and the Midtown section would be done by TxDOT under money that's given to TxDOT by the private sector contractor. My last slide just reviews the dollar amounts for you, so you can see this and study the lane configurations a little better. In that first section, you have the developer paying $162 million under what's a developer obligation. They're going to add 1 lane in each direction to the general purpose freeway, the non-toll part of the roadway, because of its success. And they need to add 1 lane to the Techspress in each direction because of the demand on our managed lane system being so successful. And they're going to have to share the additional revenue with us as part of that particular project. That next section 2E is about $1 billion. They're paying for all of it. That's the deferred section. Is to build the 4-lane toll managed lane express section to lane balance that express lane across the whole corridor. If you look at the map, we have a system of improvements from 635 at I-30 all the way across 635, down the 35 freeway to 183, all the way across 183 and up and down 35 in Fort Worth. It's a ribbon across the whole corridor, and we're doing the middle section, the busy section near the airport, with this particular concept. The third element is $360 million that the concession would write, that send a check to TxDOT and say, hey, would you please build the remaining portion of this particular project and meet with the express lanes that are in Irving. In addition, we've asked for the federal government to partner with us on a RAISE grant. But either way, you can see $162 million coming from the private sector, $1 billion coming from the private sector, $360 million coming from the private sector, all part of this partnership, creating a system across 183 Airport Freeway, right in the middle of our economic engine, which is DFW International Airport. I appreciate you being with us today to see this particular concept. It's an extremely innovative approach, largely, if not all, paid for by the private sector. Private sector wishes to move forward with its financial obligations from their original contract, and we desperately need these improvements and think timing of these now, getting ready for what will be a strong return to our traffic patterns in the months and years ahead, after, God willing, a relief of this COVID-19 situation. Thank you for being with us today, and we appreciate whatever comments or concerns or questions you have as a result of this. Thank you.
For several years now, the RTC, the Regional Transportation Council, has been working with our partners at TxDOT, local governments, and all the communities along the US 75 corridor in North Dallas and Collin counties to try to find a long-term permanent solution for mobility on US 75. However, we realize that we probably can't wait for a long-term solution to be implemented, that additional improvements are needed now. So we've been working to try to identify short-term interim improvements that can improve the situation in the corridor in the near term before we can get to that long term. Next slide, please. To that end, we've identified two components that we think will be able to help us along those lines. The first will be a much requested removal of the pylons, the plastic pylons that delineate the HOV lanes that are out there today, and turn those lanes into what we call a technology lane. And I'll explain what a technology lane is in just a second. The Regional Transportation Council and TxDOT have allocated almost $44 million to restripe and remove those pylons and provide the necessary construction for that conversion. The second phase of that will be to implement an HOV incentive program so that there is so that there still remains a HOV incentive in that corridor that replaces the current HOV lane that's there today. Next slide, please. Regarding the technology lane, the goals for the technology lane are pretty much the same as you would see for any other traditional improvement: reduce fatalities, improve response, reduce congestion, and improve air quality. However, it's important to note that the technology aspect of this extends to more than just the freeway lanes. The technology component also extends to the frontage roads, where we will monitor frontage road traffic to ensure that the green times on the traffic signals are coordinated so that additional capacity can be had on those frontage roads itself. And then, as I mentioned before, removing the pylons, but ensuring that there is still an HOV incentive in the corridor. Next slide, please. This slide shows you the limits of the project that is being proposed. The limits on US 75 will go from LBJ in North Dallas to 121 in McKinney. So it's the entire stretch of 121 in that period. As you can see on the right, the HOV lanes as exist today, you can see small pylons that delineate those lanes from the regular traffic that you see there. The only difference that you see in the section below is that those pylons have been removed between the general purpose lanes and what we are now calling the technology lanes. Next slide, please. So how are we proposing to continue an HOV incentive if we no longer have a dedicated HOV lane? Well, what we intend to do is to allow SOVs, which are called single occupant vehicles, so people that aren't carpooling and only have one person in their vehicle, will be able to use those lanes. In one option, they will be able to use those lanes for free. However, due to federal regulations, we may have to impose a small nominal toll on those facilities because of the way that the lane was funded in the past. We may have to may have to include a toll on those lanes if we let the single occupant vehicles in. But those options are being discussed now with Federal Highways. We hope to make a decision on that soon. Regarding the HOV vehicles, we propose to pay the users to drive in that lane. And it's important to note that this only applies to that lane that currently is the HOV lane. So if the vehicle is high occupant, has more than one passenger in it, we would actually pay the driver of the vehicle to use those lanes. And I'll explain how we're going to do that in a second. But the general purpose lanes, the regular lanes, would not be affected by any of this at all. Anybody could still use those lanes as they currently do today. Next page, please. And that brings us to the second component which is the travel accounting system pilot. So this is how we are going to provide the incentive to the HOV user through a Surface Transportation System Funding Alternatives grant of $10 million. We want to use our existing Go Karma system that we currently use to verify occupancy on the Techspress tolled managed lanes in the region. This would be a voluntary program where we would recruit volunteers to allow us to determine their lane, their time of day, and what occupancy they are. And if they're determined to be in that particular lane during the time periods that the program will be underway, we would pay them or credit them with an incentive during that time period. Why is the federal government interested in giving us this grant? Because at some point, the federal gas tax will no longer be viable to be collected, and we have to find a replacement for how we would charge vehicles to drive on our transportation system. So they're interested in trying to see if there's a way that vehicles can be, that costs for travel can be allocated equitably among vehicles that use certain facilities and certain lanes. It's important to note that no actual money will be collected. This is simply a back office process to determine if it's even possible to do that. But in the meantime, we will use the system to provide those HOV incentives on the US 75 corridor and other potential corridors. And again, it's purely voluntary for the participants that will be included in that, and we may be able to compensate participants as well. Next slide. The schedule for both of those efforts has already begun. We expect the technology lane conversion to be going to construction sometime before the summer of 2022, with opening in the summer of 2024. We expect the grant pilot project to begin within the next few months. We're currently negotiated with Federal Highways on that process, and that will be rolled out over several phases over the next 2 years as well. So that is the process that we intend to go through to try to bring some interim improvements to the US 75 corridor sooner than later. The next slide simply shows you the contact information for myself and Natalie Betker, another senior program manager that is also working on this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Ross. I'm an air quality planner here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments in Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities. I'll be giving an overview of our EV adoption in the region and talk about several upcoming events we will be holding for National Drive Electric Week. Next slide. So improving air quality within the transportation sector is our main priority. And one way we do this is by helping local governments and consumers adopt alternative fuel vehicles, including electric vehicles. Next slide. I wanted to start with a bit of an industry update here. It has been about 10 years since the modern electric vehicles have been put on the road, like the Chevy Bolt and the Nissan Leaf. In those 10 years, the market has grown a lot. There are now over 200 light-duty EVs available, and it's not just the standard EV sedan, but there are also options for pickups, SUVs, vans, and more. There's also a huge push for EVs in the heavier sector. Quite a few buses, including transit and school bus models, which fleets have already adopted in our region. We are also starting to see some larger trucks with electric drivetrain being manufactured, which is a huge win for emissions reduction, as larger trucks tend to have higher impact on air quality. Please note that this list also includes fuel cell electric vehicles, which seem to work really well for the heavier models due to longer range and quicker fuel time. So moving on to the next slide. I wanted to give a highlight of our EV growth in the North Texas region. We are steadily increasing at an average annual growth rate of over 30%, with over 18,000 EVs registered in our region to date. Next slide. So like I mentioned before, fleets in North Texas are diversifying with electric. And through our annual survey for the year 2020, our fleets reported 23 new plug-in electric vehicles. To continue this growth in our North Texas fleets and consumers, we've developed an extended test drive initiative called the Try and Drive Alternative Program. We currently have 4 participating vendors with vehicles ranging from light-duty sedans to terminal tractors. Next slide. We also keep a close watch on where vehicles are registered in comparison to where the infrastructure is. This map depicts EV adoption by zip code. So the darker the shading in the zip code area, the more electric vehicles are registered in that area. Also in the map, we show where the electric vehicle charging stations are in the region. So the various dots represent different types of chargers. Currently, there is a strong correlation between the locations of chargers and the homes of EVs. This is something we are actively trying to address through more focused conversations with our member governments and interested stakeholders to create an even spread of charging stations to service those travelers on interstates within and outside the region. I did want to flag that there are 2 EV incentives coming soon, an electric vehicle rebate and funding for DC fast chargers. Both will be funded through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and should be available within the next month. All incentives are posted to our website as soon as they are available at nctgog.org/AQ funding. Next slide. So now for the fun part. We are currently planning our National Drive Electric Week events and have quite a full week this year from September 25th through October 3rd. Next slide. The National Drive Electric Week is all about raising awareness and providing education on EVs, fostering opportunities for conversations around EVs, and allowing folks that may not be as familiar with EVs to be able to experience one for the first time. If you've ever ridden in an EV, the instant torque can be quite a thrill and a bit unexpected. We have hosted a National Drive Electric Week event for almost 10 years now and really measure our success based on how many people attend each year that do not own an EV. Now, last year we were all virtual, but actually received about 5,000 participants live during the event. Next slide. So this year we have a full week of events, including a few webinars for member governments and even a tour of the Peterbilt facility in Denton. Next slide. Our main event for the public will be face-to-face again this year on October 3rd. It will be held at the Wreck of Grapevine and include an EV showcase with owners and vendors from 4 to 6, announcement of the Encore 3rd Annual EV Road Rally winners from 6 to 7, and an EV-related film screening from 7 to 8:30. Our event is open to the public, so please join us for a great time getting to know EVs. All of the registration information can be found on our website at www.driveelectricdfw.org. Next slide. That's all I have. Here's my contact information as well as my supervisors. Please feel free to contact us with any questions you may have on National Drive Electric Week or any of the information I presented today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jason Brown, Principal Air Quality Planner, working in the Transportation Department's Air Quality Management Program area. For this item today, I will present the state's idling limitations rule, provide background on how it and vehicle idling restrictions have been implemented among our local governments within the Dallas-Fort Worth Ozone Nonattainment area. I'll cover what is the action that we're seeking after this public comment period and the timeline of next steps. Next slide, please. So what is the rule? The state's rule, it's the Motor Vehicle Idling Limitations Rule, and it's regulated through the Texas Administrative Code, Rule 114, and it impacts motorists within designated local government jurisdictions. It impacts medium to heavy duty vehicles, so those that are greater than 14,000 pounds. So it's not focused on everyday lightweight passenger cars. It stipulates requirements to control vehicle engine idling, so no more than 5 minutes while it's not in motion. It does contain 13 exemptions for specific circumstances based on the type of vehicle, like if it's military or emergency response vehicles, or how it's operating. For instance, if it's stuck in traffic, or air conditioning and heating that's running to maintain a driver's health and safety. It can be implemented by a city or county through a memorandum of agreement with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Now, controlling motor vehicle idling helps the Dallas-Fort Worth region to reduce tailpipe emissions from the many cars and trucks on the road. Then that also leads to the ground level ozone pollution. Now, this is important since the Dallas-Fort Worth region does not meet federal ozone standards. And heavy-duty diesel vehicles are major producers of on-road emissions, and diesel engines particularly emit high factors of emissions while they're idling. So this initiative focuses on eliminating unnecessary idling and reducing diesel engine emissions. Next slide, please. The North Central Texas region, through the COG and local governments, collaborated to focus on motor vehicle idling restrictions through a resolution supported by the Regional Transportation Council. And this is the region's transportation planning policy body. So the resolution took effect in 2008 to encourage implementation of idling restriction policies within the region. And over the years since 2008, cities and counties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area have signed the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality agreement, which allowed them to enforce the restriction. And in the meantime, many also passed city ordinances or county resolutions to enforce the idling restrictions. And in recent years, many of the TCEQ agreements have expired, but the cities and counties still have the restriction in place through their ordinances and resolutions, which did not necessarily expire. And this year, NCT COG is proposing to revise the resolution to encourage local governments to implement idling restrictions that fit their needs. So some may choose to move forward without signing the TCEQ agreement, and other cities or counties may sign, especially if they fall within the general law city or county. Additionally, collaboration with Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to develop our Engine Off North Texas local government guide led to the need to revise the resolution. Next slide, please. So let's look at the key points or the key updates to the revised resolution. Particularly the emission reductions from locally enforced motor vehicle idling restrictions will be credited within the Texas State Implementation Plan as weight of evidence. So we're changing the language so it's consistent with how the current emission credits are currently documented. It endorses implementation of idling restriction ordinances or resolution that isn't specifically tied to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality agreement, and which also maybe helps to encourage local governments to adopt idling ordinance that aligns with their needs. Next slide, please. So looking at some of the benefits, the main benefits are the revised resolution updates wording so it's consistent, again, with the current state implementation plan regarding how emissions reductions are credited, and allows the local governments, especially those maybe that are trying to tackle medium heavy duty vehicle idling within their jurisdictions, it helps to implement an ordinance and also maintain eligibility for funding for idling reduction infrastructure through the TCEQ as those opportunities arise. Next slide, please. In conclusion, our next steps are to proceed to present to the committees, our Surface Transportation Committee and our Regional Transportation Council, and moving forward for approval in October. And this is in advance of the approval for the Mobility Plan 2045 update for 2022. Next slide, please. And finally, for comments and questions, please feel free to contact me or other staff listed here on the slide. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jenny Narvaez, and I work in the Transportation Department here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. Today, I'm going to be bringing you some updates that are in or a part of our Regional Comprehensive Emissions Reduction Program. Next slide, please. This slide shows the different air pollutants that we have issues with all around the world. The first is ground level ozone, then carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and greenhouse gases. The two pollutants that we're going to be talking about today are ground level ozone and greenhouse gases. Next slide, please. So we are concerned with ground level ozone because our region is in nonattainment for two standards. The 2008 standard, which is less than or equal to 75 parts per billion. We are classified as severe, and we have until July 20th, 2027 to reach attainment under this standard. The other standard is the 2015, which is less than or equal to 70 parts per billion. We are classified as moderate, and we have an attainment date of August 3rd, 2024. So over the past years, we have worked on and continue to work on various emission inventories to try to plan and reach attainment of the ozone standard. Next slide, please. Ozone is not emitted from any one source. It is a secondary pollutant that forms when volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides mix in the presence of sunlight. NOx and VOCs are released from these various sources: point area, non-road, off-road, on-road, biogenic, and oil and gas. For our purpose, we are primarily concerned with all on-road vehicles because we do plan all the roads in the North Central Texas region. Next slide, please. This slide shows you a map of our non-attainment areas. Each one of those circles represents a monitor location, and the numbers inside it show the design values for that one monitor. So what that means is the design value is the 3-year average of the 4th highest value. And basically, the yellow monitors show 56 to 70 part per billion, and the orange 71 to 85. Next slide, please. So why are we interested in greenhouse gases? We have had various local governments request for us to start conducting inventories and come up with strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from various sources. Additionally, our current administration has set a new goal of 50 to 52% reduction from 2005 levels by the year 2030, which is only 9 years away. There is also an anticipated future potential regulatory requirements, which we may have to begin planning for. So because all of this, NCT COG is in the middle of conducting a regional emissions inventory. We have also opened that up for our local cities to conduct their own emission inventory at the city scale. Cedar Hill, Carrollton, Dallas, Denton, Farmers Branch, Frisco, Grand Prairie, Grapevine, Louisville, Mesquite, and Plano are the cities that are participating in this local cities cohort. Next slide, please. So as part of this whole overall program, we are building a greenhouse gas emission reduction toolkit. This is part of expanding a comprehensive multi-pollutant reduction strategies. We do have existing strategies to help reduce NOx and VOC emissions that lead to the formation of ozone. And so we have started building this toolkit as a way to have strategies that are available for local cities and the private sector to help them reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So we have been working on the energy strategies, and we partnered with the Environmental Defense Fund. As part of this toolkit, we have been incorporating economic growth, environmental justice, equity, applicability, emissions impact, feasibility, and of course, the cost per ton of greenhouse gas emissions. The person who has been leading this effort is our EDF Climate Corps Fellow, Lauren Johnson. And so with that said, I am now going to turn our presentation over to Lauren so she can show you what she has been working on over the summer. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. So just as far as what I've been working over this summer, I'm beginning the foundation of a large multi-pollutant emission reduction toolkit. And the goal of this toolkit is to inform greenhouse gas emission reduction in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. And they're also associated co-emitted criteria air pollutants such as ozone, which Jenny was just describing as being a non-attainment in this region, which is a priority for us. And the goal of this toolkit is for it to be recommended for local government consideration in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, and is being cultivated in response to several local governments accepting and emphasizing the need to address greenhouse gas emissions and global climate change through climate risk adaptation, mitigation, resiliency in the public, private, and social sector. Next slide, please. And in order to understand how to equitably mitigate greenhouse gases and criteria air pollutants in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, we need to understand its historical context that will lead to certain groups of people being disproportionately burdened by environmental, social, and physical factors, otherwise known as overburden. So this is an EPA definition for it, and the story of how Dallas-Fort Worth has produced overburdened communities is similar to most U.S. cities in that they slowly developed through decades of structural and environmental racism, such as redlining, racial segregation, and serial forced displacement that directed groups of people to where they lived and worked, which led to concentrations of poverty and now greenhouse gas emissions, which we are hoping to mitigate in this project today. Next slide. And with the foundation of considering overburdened communities in this project, and we have done some analyses to pinpoint what those communities are in the region, I will now be discussing how I took those insights to generate equitable energy-related strategies for this multi-pollutant emission reduction toolkit. Next slide, please. So in order to do that, I researched 33 municipalities within the NCT COG jurisdiction, and they all are comprised of various sizes that have already implemented energy-related strategies in their region. Additionally, I looked at several outside cities in the Texas and in the country, regional council of governments, and NGOs, because at the end of this research, which took about a month to complete, there was a total of 350 energy-related strategies put together. Next slide, please. And after compiling all these strategies, each strategy was placed into several buckets that represent the pollution control source the strategy will remedy. So these include area source, oil and gas specific area and sources, point source, non-road, on-road, and biogenic sources of emission. And these pollution sources are being targeted for greenhouse gas mitigation primarily because they are main contribute to carbon dioxide equivalent emissions in the region, but also to criteria air pollutants such as ozone, which is often co-emitted with carbon dioxide emissions. And once these 350 strategies were put into these various categories in terms of the different remediation types they account for, they were combined, condensed, and synthesized into 30 strategies related to energy usage. Next slide, please. And now this leads into the overall toolkit, which was beginning to be formed from all the research and analyses just mentioned. However, I was only responsible for the energy section of the toolkit and its overall design. So I'll now take you through what I came up with for the energy section. Next slide, please. So these are 30 strategies related to energy usage. They are grouped by overarching goals, which are related to the pollution control source they mitigate. So just to walk you through, the E listed underneath the goal is just a code to demonstrate that this is an energy strategy, as there will be other sections of the toolkit, such as transportation, waste, and food, that have different codes to correspond to that section. And then the numbers next to those codes correspond to what goal it is and which number strategy out of the goal it is. And the strategies bolded and highlighted in yellow are the top 5 strategies I recommend after completing all my analyses for improving the most equity while simultaneously removing the most greenhouse gases and setting up for a clean energy future. So now I'm going to give a brief tour of the energy section of the greenhouse gas emission reduction toolkit, and that will also mitigate co-emitted criteria air pollutants. Next slide, please. So this right here is a sample strategy page that has been annotated with various indicators that are represented in the greenhouse gas toolkit. So like I mentioned, there is a code representing the energy and what strategy they're a part of, the name of the strategy, and then also various co-benefits that will be gained from the implementation of the strategy. Those co-benefits are very general, such as reduced costs, economic and job growth, and resilience, but also they're pulled from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this was achieved because there are several organizations within North Central Texas and Texas as a whole, such as Dallas-Fort Worth International Airports and Dallas College, that have also used United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in its programming. So we hope to recommend those co-benefits in the implementation of these strategies. And below these co-benefits are recommended actions, which is a general description for what are the concrete actionable steps that are recommended to be taken to fully execute the strategy. And as mentioned, equity and considering overburden communities are a priority in this toolkit so that the strategies are recommended do not contribute to already existing burdens. So that is why each strategy also has an equity consideration. The below context of the strategy relates to how this is important in North Central Texas and the various resources available to implement the strategy. And then below, the boxes represent the various criteria and land use contexts that are relevant to the strategy to help understand its implementation. And with that analyses in mind and the various criteria, here is a sample energy strategy page. This is for grid flexibility and resilience, and it outlines all the actions and considerations and context that is necessary to implement this strategy in North Central Texas. Next slide, please. And just as a conclusion, next step, this project was necessary to emphasize the need for greenhouse gas and criteria air pollutant mitigation in the region, and the various co-benefits that can be implemented if these strategies are considered by local government implementing entities. And next steps for this project is to finish a regional greenhouse gas inventory and set science-based targets for the regional greenhouse gas reductions so that they are aligned with the new targets set in place by the current administration. And additionally, the next step is to finish this toolkit with sector-specific sections and to implement a public review process, such as through public meetings, surveys, and a website, so that we can partner with overburn communities so that they are considered in the implementation of these strategies. Next slide, please. So that is the conclusion of our presentation. Myself, again, is Lauren Johnson, who is an Environmental Defense on Climate Course Fellow. And if you would like to learn any more information, you can reach me out to me by email or through LinkedIn. And then also from the COG side, you can reach out to Jenny Narvaez through email or by phone. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope this is a great overview of the efforts we are doing to comprehensively address air pollutants in this region. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our September online input opportunity. Remember, comments and questions on the presented topics or any other transportation related items can be submitted on our website. And that again is www.nctcog.org/input. Can be emailed to transinfo@nctcog.org or mailed to the following address: P.O. Box 5888, Arlington, Texas 76005. Again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.